I want to ask you something before we begin. Did your roses bloom beautifully in June and then go almost completely quiet? Did you wait through July expecting that second flush, checking the plant every few days, only to slowly realize it simply wasn't coming? And did you find yourself wondering what you did wrong even though you were so sure you were doing everything right?
Well, if that sounds familiar, I can tell you almost certainly what happened. And it almost certainly happened with a pair of pruning shears in your hand on a warm summer afternoon with the absolute best possible intentions. You see, summer pruning is the most misunderstood skill in rose growing. Most of us know we need to prune, right? And we know roughly where to cut. But the specific mistakes made during summer pruning, the ones nobody at the nursery ever explains, the ones that seem completely harmless in the moment, they're actually responsible for more lost second blooms than black spot, aphids, and bad weather combined. And the most damaging mistake of all is so counterintuitive that even experienced rose growers refuse to believe it the first time they hear it. So we're going to count down 7 summer pruning mistakes today, starting with the least damaging and working our way up to the one that can erase not just your second bloom this summer, but your first bloom next year as well. That's the one I really want you to stay for. It's the one that changes everything. 7 mistakes, all of them happening in American gardens right now. Here's exactly what they are and exactly what to do instead.
Before the countdown begins, I want to take just 60 seconds to explain something about rose biology that makes every single mistake on this list make complete sense. Because once you understand this, you'll never make these errors again. Every cut you make on a rose stem in the summer does 2 things simultaneously. First, it removes a portion of the plant's photosynthetic capacity, its ability to produce the energy needed for the next flush of flowers. And second, it triggers a wound healing response, where the plant redirects resources towards sealing the cut surface before disease can enter. This means that every summer cut is a delicate negotiation between removing old growth to stimulate new flowering and preserving enough healthy tissue so the plant actually has the resources to produce those flowers. If you cut too much, the plant spends the entire summer healing rather than blooming. Cut in the wrong place and the energy goes to the wrong bud. Cut with the wrong tool or at the wrong angle, and the wound never seals cleanly. That healing response runs for weeks, and your second flush arrives late, small, or maybe not at all. Understanding this negotiation is exactly what separates a summer pruning session that produces an extraordinary second bloom from one that leaves you with a quiet, exhausted-looking plant heading into fall. All right, let's get into the countdown. Mistake number 7, using the same shears on every rose in the garden without cleaning them between plants. Now, this is the least damaging mistake on our list in terms of immediate impact on flowering. But over a season, it causes more disease spread than almost any other single gardening habit. Rose black spot, powdery mildew, and that increasingly prevalent rose rosette disease, the virus spread by tiny mites that's devastating rose gardens across the American South and Midwest, they all travel on contaminated cutting surfaces from plant to plant. When you cut a stem on a rose that has even an invisible early-stage black spot infection and then move directly to a healthy plant, the fungal spores on your blade enter the fresh cut on the healthy plant directly. No soil splash required, no airborne dispersal needed. You've just delivered the infection straight to the most vulnerable point on the plant, an open wound. But the fix is so simple, it takes 30 seconds per plant. Just keep a small container of isopropyl alcohol, really any concentration above 70% works fine, and a cloth or paper towel right beside you when you prune. After finishing each plant, just wipe the blades thoroughly before moving to the next. For rose rosette disease specifically, which has no cure and requires the entire plant to be removed and destroyed if infected, this 30-second habit is literally the difference between losing one plant and losing a whole row of them. And hey, good shears matter here too. Bypass pruners, the type with 2 curved blades that pass each other like scissors, they make much cleaner cuts than anvil pruners, which kind of crush the stem slightly as they cut. A crushed stem takes way longer to callus over, giving disease a much larger window to enter. If you're using anvil pruners on your roses this summer, switch to bypass, and I promise you'll see the wound healing improvement within a week. Moving on to mistake number 6, cutting rose stems straight across rather than at the correct angle. Now, this might seem like a really small technical detail. Trust me, it's not. The angle of your cut determines how quickly the wound seals, how much moisture sits on the cut surface, and whether the bud below the cut develops into a strong flowering shoot or a weak, misshapen one. The correct cut is made at a 45-degree angle, slanting downward away from the bud you're cutting above. This angle does 2 crucial things. First, it sheds water. A flat, horizontal cut on a rose stem in summer basically creates a tiny little platform where rain, dew, and irrigation water can pool and sit. And standing moisture on a fresh cut, that's an open invitation to Botrytis and other fungal pathogens that enter through wound tissue. An angled cut sheds that water immediately. Second,
The angle creates a larger surface area for callus formation, which means the wound seals faster, and that healing response we talked about, the one competing with your flowers for resources, concludes much sooner. And the bud direction matters just as much as the angle. Every cut should be made just above a bud that faces outward from the center of the plant, away from the interior, not toward it. The bud directly below your cut is the one that's going to activate and produce the next shoot. An outward-facing bud produces an outward-growing shoot, opening the plant to light and airflow. An inward-facing bud produces a crossing shoot that heads directly into the center of the plant, creating shade and humidity in there, which sets up the exact conditions that mildew and black spot absolutely love. So stand back before every cut, identify an outward-facing bud at the right height, and angle the cut upward toward the bud at 45 degrees. This single discipline produces measurably better second flushes and significantly healthier plants through the fall. Down to mistake number 5, removing too many leaves during summer deadheading and pruning.
Think of leaves as the solar panels of your rose plant. Every single leaf on that plant is actively converting sunlight into the sugars and energy compounds that power root function, stem development, and most critically for us in the summer, flower bud development. When you remove leaves, you're literally removing energy production capacity. The more leaves you take off, the less energy the plant has available for the second flush. Now, most gardeners understand that removing some leaves is sometimes necessary, right? Diseased leaves need to come off and crossing stems need to be cleared out. But the mistake is removing healthy green leaves unnecessarily just to tidy the plant after the first flush. Some folks strip lower leaves just because they look a little tired or dusty. Some remove leaves attached to stems they aren't even pruning, simply because they're reaching around in the plant. Others cut stems back way further than the deadhead requires, taking several healthy leaf nodes right off in the process. Here is the golden rule. Only remove leaves that are visibly diseased, damaged, or attached to a stem you're actively removing for a specific reason. Every healthy green leaf that stays on that plant is contributing directly to the energy budget of your second bloom. A plant that goes into its midsummer rest period with a full, healthy canopy of leaves is going to produce a second flush significantly larger than one that was stripped bare during deadheading. If diseased leaves are present, absolutely remove them and dispose of them, and please, never add them to a compost pile where those spores can survive and recirculate. But healthy leaves are highly productive assets. Just leave them alone. Mistake number 4, deadheading to the wrong point on the stem. This is where the specific biology of summer rose pruning gets genuinely fascinating, and where the difference between a 3-week wait for the second flush and a 6-week wait is determined by a single decision made with each cut. When you deadhead a spent rose flower, you're redirecting the plant's energy away from seed production, forming the hip, and into new bud development. The bud that activates in response to your deadheading is the one sitting in the axil of the leaf just below your cut. This is the critical point. The bud in the axil of the highest leaf below your cut is the one that grows. If you cut just below the flower head, right above the first small leaf, you're activating a small, immature bud in a weak axil. The shoot that comes from that is going to be thin, it'll produce a small or malformed flower, and it's going to take much longer to develop. But if you cut down to the first leaf with 5 or more leaflets, the first strong, fully developed leaf junction below that spent bloom, you activate a mature, robust bud. That bud produces a strong stem and a full-sized, well-formed flower in just 3 to 4 weeks, rather than 5 to 7. The 5-leaflet leaf is the correct point. Not the first leaf, not just 2 leaves down, the first leaf with 5 or more leaflets. On some roses, this is right immediately below the spent flower. On others, it might be 4 or 5 nodes down the stem. But wherever it is, that is where the cut belongs, angled at 45 degrees just above that leaf junction and above an outward-facing bud if there's one available right there. This single change in your deadheading practice, if you apply it consistently through the summer, will give you second flushes that arrive weeks earlier with noticeably larger, better-formed flowers than if you deadheaded shallowly. We are at mistake number 3, pruning in the heat of the afternoon. Now, this is the mistake that most gardeners make purely out of convenience. You go out to tend the garden on a warm afternoon, you see some spent blooms, and you just deadhead while you're out there. It feels incredibly efficient. But it's actually one of the absolute least ideal times to make cuts on a rose plant in the summer. Let's look at the biology behind the timing. In the peak heat of the afternoon, typically between noon and 4 o'clock in the summer, your plants are under their maximum transpiration stress. Water is evaporating from the leaf surfaces at the highest rate of the entire day. The stomata in the leaves are often partially closed to try and reduce that water loss, and the plant's vascular system is under serious pressure managing moisture distribution. Making cuts at this exact moment exposes fresh wound tissue to maximum heat and dryness, at the precise point when the plant's ability to initiate a healing response is most compromised. Morning is the correct time for summer rose pruning. In the morning, the plant has had those cool, overnight hours to recover its full water pressure. The cut surface gets to heal in the relatively cool, less intense morning light. So by the time that afternoon heat arrives, the initial callus formation is already well underway, and the wound is partially sealed.
Cuts made in the morning also have a much lower exposure to the fungal spore dispersal that tends to peak in warm, humid afternoon air. Now, if you can only get outside in the afternoon, early evening is your second best option, after the peak heat is passed and before dew forms on the leaves. But the one time you really genuinely want to avoid is that midday to early afternoon window in July and August specifically, when temperatures are peaking and the plant is under maximum heat stress.
Mistake number 2, walking away immediately after cutting without sealing large wounds. For most deadheading cuts on pencil-thin stems, wound sealant really isn't necessary. The plant calluses those small cuts quickly and efficiently in warm summer conditions. But any cut you make on a stem thicker than roughly a ½ inch in diameter, which includes the removal of an entire cane, cutting back a main stem, or doing significant corrective pruning during the summer, that benefits considerably from a wound sealant applied immediately after cutting. The reason for this is exposure time. A large cut on a thick rose cane takes significantly longer to callus over than a small deadhead cut. And during those days or weeks that a large wound is healing, it acts as an open entry point for canker fungi, specifically Botrytis cinerea and various Coniotherium species. These cause those sunken, discolored canker lesions that spread down into the main stem and can literally kill entire canes over a single winter. Wound sealant, which you can pick up from any local nursery in a small brush-on container, should be applied to the cut surface immediately after making the cut, before any contamination can occur. It dries in minutes and creates a physical barrier that prevents spore entry while the plant's own healing response gets to work beneath it. Now, here's an additional step that experienced rose growers use. Check your large cuts for the color of the pith. That's the tissue right at the center of the cut stem. Healthy rose pith is white or maybe a very pale cream. If it's brown or discolored, that indicates disease or damage has already progressed down into the stem. If you see brown pith, keep cutting further down the cane until you find pith that is white and clean. Only then should you apply the sealant. If you seal over diseased tissue, you're just trapping the infection inside and accelerating its spread rather than preventing it.
And now, mistake number 1, the one that can erase not just your second bloom this summer, but your entire first bloom next spring on certain rose varieties. The one that experienced rose growers see happening in gardens everywhere in June and July, and they just wince quietly from the other side of the fence. That mistake is hard pruning once-blooming roses in the summer. I know, for many of you, this probably seems completely obvious, but here is exactly why it's the most costly mistake on this entire list. It's almost impossible to identify which roses in your garden bloom once and which rebloom without having specific knowledge of the variety. Because once-blooming roses look identical to repeat-blooming ones for most of the season. And once-blooming roses bloom on old wood, the growth that was produced the previous season. When you hard prune a once-blooming rose in summer, cutting back those main canes significantly, removing large amounts of old growth, cutting stems back to a low framework, you are actually removing the very wood that would have carried next year's first bloom. The plant will regrow from your cuts, sure. It'll produce beautiful fresh growth through late summer and fall, it'll go into winter looking perfectly healthy, and then it will produce very few or absolutely no flowers the following June. The bloom was cut off before it ever even had a chance to form. The once-blooming roses most commonly found in American gardens are our old garden roses, your gallicas, centifolias, albas, and most damasks. It also includes many climbing roses, like climbing Cecile Brunner, American Beauty, and Paul Scarlet, as well as most ramblers. Many of these are sitting in established American gardens right now simply because they were planted by a previous generation who grew them for their extraordinary once-annual display and their incredible fragrance. So the rule for once-blooming roses in summer is strictly this: deadhead spent blooms only, and do it very gently, removing just the flower head without any significant stem removal. All major pruning of once-blooming varieties should happen immediately after the blooms finish, within 2 to 3 weeks of that last flower fading, while the plant still has the full summer growing season to produce the old wood that will carry the following year's display. Summer hard pruning of once-blooming roses isn't just unhelpful, it literally eliminates an entire year of blooms. If you aren't completely certain whether a rose in your garden blooms once or repeats, just observe it through late summer. A repeat blooming rose is going to show new buds and flowers appearing through July, August, and September. A once-blooming rose will produce absolutely no new buds after that initial flush ends. That single observation made just once tells you everything you need to know about how to prune it for the rest of the time you grow it. So, 7 mistakes. Every single one of them happening in American rose gardens this summer, and every one of them completely preventable once you understand the biology behind them. Clean your shears with alcohol between plants to stop disease from traveling on your blade, cut at 45 degrees above outward-facing buds to direct energy the right way and seal wounds cleanly. Keep healthy green leaves on the plant. During deadheading, every leaf is energy your second bloom desperately needs.
deadhead down to the first 5 leaflet leaf junction, not shallowly just above the flower head. Prune in the cool morning or early evening, never in the afternoon heat. Seal those large cuts on thick stems immediately and always check the pith for healthy white tissue first. And finally, know whether your roses bloom once or repeat before you make any significant summer cut, because that single piece of knowledge protects an entire year of flowers.
Before you go, I want to ask you something specific. Drop a comment below and tell me which US state you are gardening in and which of these 7 mistakes you were making without realizing it. I read every single comment and I reply to as many as I possibly can. Knowing exactly where you are helps me understand what your roses are dealing with right now, and it helps me make explainers that are genuinely useful for your specific climate and growing season. If this explainer helped you out, please give it a like and subscribe. It helps the channel reach more rose growers who are losing their second blooms to these preventable mistakes. The next time you step into your garden with shears in your hand, ask yourself, are you cutting away your plant's future, or are you setting the stage for its greatest bloom yet? Happy growing. I'll see you in the next explainer.